Focus. All right, click the links for Out of CBS. You get Telegram, join the subscribe star, the various other links. So two little bits on Heather Antos. One, her predictable response. She's not wired right. She's not playing with a full deck. She's not firing on a full deck. There's something's not quite right with her, because her response over the years, as people in Comicsgate have been watching her, it's more and more unhinged. It's not just a typical 35-year-old liberal woman's response. It's you get a feel with some people, they're just not quite right. Well, I kind of get that feel with her. And the real thing is, like, nothing happens to her. She can say, she and a bunch of other people, as we'll take a look at Carlos Moss's tweet in a minute, can say the most insane things, literal calls to violence. And of course, no, the FBI is not going to do anything to them. But like the Twitter terms of service, they don't violate the Twitter terms of service. Why? Because they're left wing and they're blue check mark. That's just what it comes down to. So movies, shows, and comics are, after 2020, you kind of felt a shift in entertainment and pop culture from mere political correctness to just insane woke levels. And you started seeing pox people in every freaking advertisement, just to the point of absurdity, where even kind of normies are looking at this and going, this doesn't make any sense, but we're going to do it anyway. So after the 2020 riots, that's what happened. And, 2016, the Trump derangement syndrome was something also. But this is going to just ramp up Hollywood to, they're going to be insufferable on this issue of states' rights. Oh, no, you can't delete babies. It's a states' rights issue. It's going to be nonstop Handmaid's Tale, which, I think is their BDSM fantasy. Hollywood is going to be women struggle snuggled, forced to have a kid who destroy their vaginas and grows up to literally be Satan or the Austrian corporal, which in their insane minds is worse because they're insane. I can guarantee you that you'll see a trans woman who is forced to give birth. It might be impossible, but it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Hollywood and America are going to reach levels of clown world you thought unimaginable. Even in the 60s and 70s, when this stuff was really popping off, there was acts of demolition. There was like one per day, and through, I think, 1972, there was just mass kind of civil disturbance. People still kind of knew what a woman was. They still had some basis in reality. Now in 2022, there is absolutely no limit. So what happened was a 50-year-old decision was overturned. It just went back to the states. It's not a big deal. You just vote in your state and the people will decide it. As half the states, it's always going to be legal in some form. But really, they kind of brought this on themselves, because they were doing California and New York, I think, were pushing for perinatal deletions of human life. Peri means after birth, after the baby is born. There's that famous clip of the guy going, yeah, well, we'll keep it comfortable, and then the mother and the doctor will decide what to do. And there was a couple of those hearings that came out, and they were asking these doctors questions, and people heard it, and it took a while to click to hear what they're really saying. It's like, oh dear God, they actually want to do this. This is unsustainable. We cannot, to the point of saying we cannot live with people who will do that to babies born. So those hearings kind of got people thinking, and really they kind of, like, they did this themselves. They, like, the left wing accelerated all this stuff way too fast. The people just weren't ready for it, and I think now it's kind of swinging back on them. But Hollywood will ignore that and just be insanely pretentious. Every scene will be a blonde-haired, blue-eyed politician with a huge crucifix around their necks. He will be struggle-snuggling women, probably will be Mexican and black ones, and then they will tie them to a hospital bed, forcing them to give birth, but birth will rip the mom's twat in half because the baby is a 20-pound monster, and the blonde Christians will laugh and Roman salute to each other. They'll also do away with the 13th and 19th Amendment, bringing back slavery and forcing women into sexual slavery, because half of these women have a BDSM 50 Shades of Grey fantasy thing going on. I swear to God, I'm not even kidding. These women are just twisted perversion. Keep in mind that the women protesting this are all about 250 pounds, and it's really kind of a moot issue for them anyway. So there'll be scenes of the blonde kids will be marching around in vaguely German uniforms, the MAGA Youth Corps to eradicate perversity and degeneracy. Oh yeah, somehow they'll tie Trump into this, even though I don't know how, but they will. Or there will be a blonde-haired leader who's chubby, and he'll be wearing a red hat, and the hat insignia will be, what was the German? It's like black on white and red, or it's some combination of those colors. People use it all the time when they're trying to evoke just the stupidest World War II imagery. The leader will be blonde and wearing a hat like that, and he'll probably have blue eyes. They'll have little MAGA kids obviously marching around, and there will be scenes of book burnings, and they might flash to black and white. For some reason they do that to make it more dramatic. I just kind of, or they'll might do like a kind of, not a pixelated image, but they'll kind of age the film or something, or put little dots to make a digital image look like old film reel, disintegrating film reel, or something to be dramatic. And they're probably going to have public canings, because like I said, for a lot of these people, it seems to be there's a BDSM fantasy thing going on. So either Heather or Antos is really fired up about something, where she says she wants to burn something down, the courthouse perhaps, or the churches for some reason. I don't know what state she's in. It'd be interesting to find what state she's protesting, and if it's going to be legal in that state. Which I'm sure she's on the East Coast or West Coast somewhere, so it's probably not even an issue. So, the people are in California who are protesting, where it will always be legal. In fact, Gavin Newsom is talking about something vaguely along the lines of flying people in from states, or busing people in from states where it's illegal, to get them to come into California or Oregon, Washington, wherever it's legal, and delete the kids, and then bust them back on the taxpayer's dime. Because that's California. You get what you vote for, I suppose. So they're probably going to burn down some churches that had nothing to do with it whatsoever. And probably in California, too, which is funny because California churches are pretty liberal. But it will show people what happened when the left wing doesn't get their way. They just take off the figurative mask and they put on a literal one and commit violence. Because, as it turns out, that is what the bomb-throwing Bolsheviks were always about. Authoritarian dictators. To the point of, to see the response over, is completely unwarranted to go from a federal issue to a state's issue, to see people openly advocate for violence. But I agree with you, violence is a legitimate and appropriate response to oppression. No argument from me there. But I will say, if this is honestly the feeling of a fair percentage of people, then why don't you just look at a peaceful separation of different states into a 50-state model, but go back to a 50-state model where 50 states have borders. They have the right to control those sorts of things, and a much reduced federal government, or a multi-region model where those regions have borders and a much reduced, any peaceful separation is going to result in a much weakened federal government, which is good anyway, because even, right from the start, the Fed grew in power so rapidly that, if anything, it's absolutely time to start disintegrating that. So I don't suspect that they will go for that. But Christy Winters was also in here. So Christy Winters saw this response, and her title is "Stop Christian Fascism." Winters. That's Stop Christian Fascism. I guess that's the response to Roe v. Wade. It's Christian fascism? So I'm not sure if you know what fascism means. Anyway, so Heather makes poorly edited comics, and she's not going to leave her house to do anything. She's hoping that she will start the fire and miss the firefight. This is, inspiring others to violence is kind of what a lot of left-wing armchair people are all about, especially the 35-year-old female contingent. So speaking of poorly edited comics, she seems to have a problem, which sucks because she's allegedly an editor, so I assume that her skills might lie in other directions. So what happens is she's editing this Star Trek comic, and there's one massive error, but then there's a bunch of errors in continuity. Now, here's the thing with errors in continuity on the left. This is something I've noticed for left-wing pop culture is they're moving away from continuity. Is probably the Disney Star Wars was the big thing there, where they kind of realized, like, to be woke and politically correct and to remake these things in the direction they wanted to remake in them, they were going to have to do away with continuity anyway, which destroys story. It hurts storytelling because it destroys a willing suspension of disbelief, where continuity is actually important because it keeps people in the story, and once you break out of it, it starts pulling people slowly out of the story, and it also feels more and more like propaganda when you're bending the characters or ultimately breaking the characters to push a narrative, which it is. Like the left wing who are pulling strings on these comics in Hollywood, they're not subtle about any of this kind of stuff. This is very, very heavy handed. So there's an editing miss there, and then there's a bunch of continuity errors and characterization errors and stuff like that. And I'm not sure if that's her fault or the writer's fault, or it's like if it's the writer and she was supposed to catch it, but the writer is so off base. Well, then what's the writer even doing there? Or is it that they were told to make this comic and it was just going to be really loose, where it just doesn't matter as much? Though I suspect that if you're a Star Trek aficionado, but then there's also this thing like between transformative and curative, where the SJWs are transformative to twist things into whatever they want to suit whatever narrative they want to suit, and the classic fans are curative. They want to see the original story because that's what people got into. And it's like transformative. There's no. I mean, that's a nice way of saying, oh, you just want to make propaganda, because that's absolutely what it is. They just want to make propaganda. So I'm not sure what. Other than that typo, I'm not sure if it's really fair to say she didn't edit the continuity and the characterization correctly when, I don't know, who's in charge of like fleshing out the story, the writer, the editor, and I don't know who's pulling strings on that. But if they said like, yeah, let's just kind of go in this direction and things just don't matter that much. I mean, misnaming something matters, obviously, but like the continuity stuff, I'm not sure if it matters, because I don't think comics matter anymore. In a way that it's kind of sad to say that, because it's a kind of an end of an era when SJWs get hold of something and they just woke it they just woke it to extinction from this mortal coil. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys all on Odyssey, Subscribe Star, Gab, Telegram, and Odyssey and BitChute.